Hello, welcome to Season 7 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, our theme is the current state of horror. We'll be watching 20 or so movies from the last couple of years, reviewing them like normal, and then also talking about some of the larger trends we see. If you want to see the list and follow along, check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So I think my favorite part of this movie might have been that retro-looking Orion Pictures logo in the beginning.
It's funny because I noticed that too.
I had this super nostalgic reaction to that. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I went into a rabbit hole on Wikipedia. And Orion's a production company that was super active in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. And, like, the list just goes on and on. Like, they put out RoboCop, Rambo, The Three Amigos, Caddyshack, Terminator, Hoosiers, and, of course, my own personal favorite, Clifford.
Clifford, yep.
Yeah. And so, like, but those were all, like, huge movies that, you know, you would see on TV or that my parents would rent. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of weird because that was such, like, a big part of life for so long, and then it seems like they just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
But apparently they did a lot of, like, partnerships in the later 90s, and then MGM bought them in 99, and then Orion just disappeared. But then in like 2015, they started putting out movies under that brand again, and they brought back the original logo, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah, it's crazy how many good films came out of that.
Yeah, it was insane. A really, really long list. And there were a bunch of others, too, that are movies that I like now, but that just weren't like, you know, the essential part of my childhood, like The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, Dances with Wolves, Silence of the Lambs, Addams Family, First Blood, Terminator.
Yeah.
Goodness.
But yeah, so when I first saw that, I thought they were doing like some kind of retro throwback thing with the movies, or with this movie, because I hadn't read or really done any looking into the story of this at all. I just knew it was like a reboot, and so I was thinking it was going to be like one of those 80s themed type movies, and they were starting off with that, you know, sort of quintessentially 80s like movie intro.
Right.
But no, that was not the case at all. This movie was very, very 2019.
Yeah, extremely. Like, couldn't get any more modern.
Yeah, so.
If anything, more in the future, I would think.
Yeah, the not-so-distant future, I guess. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, so if you were expecting a remake of the original Child's Play that was true to the source material, you might have picked the wrong movie, my friend.
Yeah, and I will say this, I was expecting that.
Yeah.
Because this was like, we kind of decided this on short notice. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when I started watching it, like thinking that was the case, and I realized at the very beginning it wasn't. But
yeah. Well, cool. I will introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we will get into it. In 2019, United Artists Releasing brought us Child's Play, a modern reboot of the horror classic from 1988. In this present-day take on the story, Chucky is a smart home accessory with AI gone wrong. The doll has his safety rules removed by a disgruntled employee at the factory and begins to mimic violent behavior that he observes. Chucky is initially given to a boy named Andy by his mom, but eventually Andy rejects him and Chucky doesn't take it very well. Also, there are creepy murder bear dolls for some reason. This movie was made on a budget of around $10 million and brought in around $45 million at the box office. It can currently be streamed on Amazon Prime Video. Finally. We tried to do this, like, week 3 or 4 of this season, and it just wasn't available anywhere unless you wanted to buy it, and I wasn't ready to commit, and now I feel justified in that decision.
Right, yeah. No,
but now
absolutely.
It is available.
I think I would have been pissed if we bought it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
What did you learn about this, Jim?
So did you know that Mark Hamill voiced Chucky?
I did not pick up on that. Sarah actually brought it up.
Oh, did she?
At the end, she's like, "Yeah, that's the Star Wars guy." I was like, no way. And then his name popped up in the credits like immediately, and I was like, "Well, yeah, you called that one."
Yeah, I actually don't know much about him, but he voiced it. I can tell you that much for sure. So they had tried to get this remake going for quite a while, I guess. So much so where it even goes back to 2009 when they were talking about wanting to do a remake of the original.
Oh, wow.
It took them 10 years. One of the delays that they had was the bad reviews of The Nightmare on Elm Street, or like the new latest ones, I guess, that came out. Mm-hmm. Liv Tyler was also it was announced that she was considered for a role in the film, whatever that means. But it went through a whole bunch of change. Like, it was on in like 2017, then it got put back off, and then back on in July 2018, I guess. Which I thought was kind of interesting. It's like, just go with it, man. Like, one or the other. I initially had plans on like getting into facts about Chucky itself, but I figure we'll be doing another like Chucky series before this podcast is up, and so I'm going to save those for there. But Don Mancini, Mancini, the creator of the characters and series, was not involved with this film. Along with Alex Vincent, Christine Ellis, and Jennifer Tilly, supposedly they weren't big fans of it either.
Weird.
And the last fact, going back to Mark Hamill, he voiced Chucky in this film, as I stated previously. However, he also voiced Chucky in the series Robot Chicken and another episode, Robot Chicken Plastic Buffet. That's all I got.
Not bad. Yeah, I feel like this one was kind of in and out of the theater pretty quick. Like, I didn't really hear a lot of talk about it at the time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, just to be up, you probably picked up already on just the way we've talked about it. I don't think this was a particularly good horror movie. I think that it was probably okay for, like, younger people. But I think that even rewatching the original, like, within the past year, I feel like it is still a better movie than this one, which was tried to be made like super updated and with much more like modern effects.
Yeah, so that was one thing that really kind of threw me off, was the effects of this movie. Like, I didn't initially notice it at first. Like, it took a little bit, but the CGI that they had, like with Chucky, where like he obviously was like full body Chucky was always like, or it always seemed like he was CGI. Mm-hmm. And then like they would do up close shots of like an actual doll.
Yeah.
That really kind of threw me off, threw me for a curveball, because it was like, man, they did this like in the 80s with
right. It was a more convincing job in the 80s,
right?
Yeah,
which is kind of sad. But and then so while watching, and it's a child of this podcast where it's a product of the podcast where I tend to get frustrated with some of the movies that we're watching, because I'm having to pay attention more when I normally wouldn't. And I was like, God, this is really pissing me off. And then it kind of hit me, where I remember doing Child's Play and like talking about like, oh, like the storyline's pretty crazy. And like I got to thinking, like, which one's more crazy though? Like a programmer going crazy and doing something like this, Daniel, or a serial killer dying and the soul of it going into Chucky. I'm just saying, this one almost seems more realistic.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent. So I read about that a little bit more later, because I was like, so if the disgruntled employee reprogrammed Chucky to be evil, but then Chucky wasn't evil until he watched people and learned to be evil, which one was it? You know,
I just thought he wiped out all the overrides, so like something that would trigger it.
Yeah, so I went back and I read about it, and what was supposed to have happened is that he removed like the safety protocols or something. Yeah. So that makes a little bit more sense. That just seems like kind of a anticlimactic way to sabotage your company. I mean, it just seems like he could have done a lot more effectively.
Like, we work with a bunch of computer nerds.
Yeah.
We know, like, the odds of a disgruntled employee coming in, like, punching someone that they're pissed off at is a lot lower
You're saying programmers would be more passive aggressive. Fine, yeah, I can see that too.
Yeah.
But all that said, I thought it took me by surprise because I didn't know what I was getting into going into it. I thought it was like more of a remake of the original. So I was kind of surprised that they made the doll like a smart home device.
Yeah, I was too.
And to me, it really changed the feeling of the movie, like the type of horror. And it wasn't like a curse and like a serial killer. It didn't feel as much like a slasher to me, I guess.
No,
it was more like AI gone wrong, almost like creature horror type. So the overall vibe of it, I thought, was different.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think with this, and I would like to get this out there too, I definitely was not a fan of this movie. And I don't know if it's because... And I don't know if I would be a fan of Chucky or Child's Play, the original, if I'd watched it as a adult. Mm-hmm. But what I thought was funny is that this one, I assume, was rated R just because of all the blood and guts.
Yeah.
What I thought was funny is it seemed like the first one didn't have as much as blood and guts as it did just bad language. Mm-hmm. And like this one, I thought was almost like the exact opposite, where there's a little bit of bad language, but it was really kind of gruesome in the killing and like the face on the watermelon kind of thing. I just thought it was kind of funny.
Made no sense to me in like what it was trying to do or be, because like sometimes it really felt more like a young adult movie, like kind of a coming of age type story and hanging out with your friends and going for some humor and stuff. And then there were other times where it was almost like too graphic to fit with that. It was just like the overall tone of the movie felt really disjointed to me as it went along. So I don't know. And I didn't think the acting was particularly good. But going back to what you said about the CG on the doll, I actually expected it to be worse than it was. It distracted me less than I thought it was going to. And one thing that they did on purpose was to make like the doll's mouth off from what it was saying.
Oh, yeah.
And that came across as super creepy to me. That was like one of the few things in the movie that I thought really worked. So I wanted to kind of search through for that one bright spot because most of the rest of what I have to say is not so great.
I got a really bright spot for you.
Okay.
In this movie, it has Aubrey Plaza in it. And she plays the exact same role that she does in every single thing she's ever been in.
It actually threw me off because the son's name was Andy, but in Parks and Recreation, her boyfriend's name is Andy. So that was just weird.
Yeah. I was like, oh, Aubrey Plaza's in it. That's cool. Like, she seems like she's into, I don't know, dark stuff. And I was like, oh, playing the exact same character as you've always played, AC. Oh, okay.
You should see the movie Ingrid Goes West. It has her in it, and she's like cast perfectly for the role of the character. Super good. Anyway, and closing the loop from last week, I think that's a Neon film as well.
Oh.
So there you go. But yeah, so another thing, so again, disjointed is the word that I keep coming back to for this movie. There were some, as you said, super violent scenes. But in both of the super violent scenes, they went over the top to establish that the person getting killed deserved it.
Yeah.
And then they also both couldn't move to the left or right. So hear me out.
Okay.
Stepdad, or boyfriend, whatever.
Yeah.
His name is Shane.
Mm-hmm.
He's a jerk. He yells at Andy because the cat is freaking out.
Yeah.
It's a silly reason to storm into someone's room and yell at them. Then he goes home. Turns out he has a whole family. He's been stepping out with Andy's mom.
Mm-hmm. Bad
dude. You know you don't like him. He's always holding a beer. They're doing all the classic movie things to make you realize he's a bad dude.
Yep.
So he's at home. He's taking down some Christmas lights, and then he falls on the ground. And it's super gruesome because you see like both of his shin bones shatter out like through the skin. That was the most attention grabbing scene in the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But then he falls down, obviously broken legs, and the tiller is coming after him. and he's on a path through his, like, the landscaping in his front yard.
Mm-hmm.
And he's pulling himself. He's dragging himself away and dragging and dragging. But if he had rolled 2 feet to either the right or left, he would have been perfectly safe.
Right. I see exactly what you're saying.
Case in point number 2.
Oh, God, there's more?
The creepy guy that works at the apartment complex.
Yeah.
They go over the top to establish that he's a creeper and a perv.
Right.
And then you finally get, like, the full evidence. It's like, oh, yeah, the thing we've been implying the whole movie, now let's stuff it in your face. He has cameras in everybody's apartment. He's spying on Andy's mom in the bathroom. He is a creep and a terrible person. But he's in this weird, like, boiler room, presumably at the apartment complex. And he has, like, a buzzsaw, or a table saw. And it gets turned on underneath him, so he jumps up and he's holding onto a pipe. And then Chucky turns on the hot water so the pipe gets hot.
Yeah.
He has to let go and fall down directly onto the table saw. But if he could have just swung 2 feet to the left or right, he would have been completely fine.
Mm. Do you have a third point?
No, because the third point is the counterexample. The third point is that then they killed the cop's mom, and you had no reason to think she was anything but like a super sympathetic and good character.
That's true.
But they didn't show anything gruesome in that one. They just had her die. So it was really weird to me because the movie, it felt like, was going out of its way to make you hate everyone that was dying and to know that they deserved it. Mm-hmm. But then in one of the other, like, big setup death scenes, it was somebody that you really didn't want to die. And so those just felt like super unbalanced to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not to argue, but I hated that grandma. And I thought that the boyfriend was normal. Actually, so, you could argue that the grandma might be able to have stayed alive, or the older would have been able to stay alive if she'd just gone out to the right of the, gone out the door to the right, like opened the car door and left.
Yeah, had she moved 2 feet out of the car, she would have been fine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think maybe that was when they were trying to show that Chucky was like not just trying to protect him,
becoming more out of control.
Maybe. I don't know. It was weird for me too, I think, because Andy was also like a 15-year-old kid.
Yeah, he was a little old for the doll.
He was 6 years old, I think, in like the first film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the whole doll thing makes sense. Like this one, it's like he was like 15, and Karen, his mother, looked like she was like 21, and so it was like, it could just be an older sister.
Yeah. Oh, she would love to hear you say that. But here's another thing.
Yeah, that's how she would act. Oh, that's okay, I guess.
Nailed it.
Thank
you should answer a casting call.
Yeah, I guess I will. Fine.
So here's another reason I had trouble trusting Andy. Because he wore a hearing aid that he didn't seem to need. That thing fell off like 4 times, and then someone would talk to him immediately after, and he'd be like, yeah, totally. You're like, wait, what?
I wish that you would have just stopped after he wore a hearing aid. I was on board until you explained it, and now I just feel bad for the kid.
But that was like some weird like Munchausen's by proxy thing where his mom was like, no, you're deaf, put this in your ear. And he's like, Mom, I can hear just fine. But
yeah,
that was weird.
Yeah, I mean, ties into you want your hand held sometimes, but not too much throughout a film. And this one was like, oh, Chucky can control electronics. Oh, old boy's wearing hearing aid. I wonder if that's going to come into play.
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of cheap.
Yeah. I mean, he could have just been walking around in a Bluetooth headset the whole time,
Yeah, I mean, it was just what was confusing.
Selling loose cigarettes on the corner.
Like every other kid should be doing.
Exactly. Earning his keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Get the old boyfriend back in, I bet that's what would have happened. And I support it. What's weird for me, though, I think, is you have a movie that comes out, and I think we may have talked about this before, so I might be repeating myself, but I don't really give a shit. So you have a movie, Child's Play, that comes out and it's rated R, but then it has like the dialogue and the hand-holding of like a PG-13 movie. You know what I mean? Like, so it's made.
No, for sure.
Like,
I actually looked it up after, because Sarah and I were debating like, would that movie be rated R? And I was like, not a chance. And then we looked it up, and it was rated R. She was right about everything on this one.
It's almost like she's watched it before.
She didn't even watch it the time we watched. She was on her phone the whole time.
Yeah.
As it's normal, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it was... I don't know, it's just weird to me that, like... Not that I'm looking for something... I'm not looking for, like, you know, the witch dialogue and, like, understand... Like, you have to focus and stuff. I'm just saying it's, like... I don't know, man. I always get kind of torn. I get torn on like remakes of any movie, any genre, because it's like you got to make sure it's good, and like I feel like they go one of two routes. Like one, they actually legit are a fan of the movie and try to make something good, and the other, I feel like, well, it's a good way to make some money. It's almost like a tax write-off.
Yes, and that was exactly kind of where I wanted this conversation to end up. Was, you know, we're talking this season about the current state of horror and some like larger trends that we see in horror movies over the last few years. And I think that remakes is a really big one, or like additional movies in a franchise, but also trying to cross those over to mainstream audiences and not focusing on being a horror movie. And we talked about with The Nun how with a lot of them now that are sort of part of these bigger franchises or bigger series or trying to bring in like the blockbuster type audience, they almost feel more like adventure movies because they've added so much of like the Hollywood cliche and all of those things that they know need to be in a blockbuster movie that packs a bunch of people in the summer, that they don't really focus on trying to be a horror movie or do anything creative from the horror perspective. And so I feel like this one definitely fell into that. It was more like a kid's adventure. I mean, to me, it felt almost more akin to Goonies than the original Chucky.
Oh, yeah.
Goonies, I feel like, was a much better movie, but the point, you know, notwithstanding. So, and I just kind of... I feel like I'm being super negative with it, but it's as a fan of horror movies and as somebody going into it for horror, I feel like it's just not doing what it's advertising on that front. And so it's just a little bit disappointing, but it works. I mean, this movie made 4.5 times its budget. If you could get a 450% return on any investment, you'd do it all day long. So you can't really even like fault the people that make it. But it's just, as a fan of horror and as somebody who wants to go to the movies and be drawn in and to experience something creative on the horror front, I feel like this is not the movie for you.
Well, not to argue, but I think you're wrong. I think it's insulting, and it's only because I'm not the one that's getting that profit in return.
Fair.
Here's the other thing.
Okay.
I pulled up remakes that are better than the original to see if that's a thing.
I'm preemptively pissed, but go on.
Well, let me tell you. Chucky or Child's Play is not looking that bad because each list I've looked at is a bunch of freaking idiots. Yeah. This one has the Wicker Man 2006 version is better. Both of those movies suck. This has the Jungle Book. You're trying to tell me the remake of the Jungle Book?
No. Yeah.
No. Huh. All right,
no.
Back to business. True Grit? Mother.
Oh,
you
no.
Well, yeah, what can you do?
Yeah. The only remake of The Wicker Man that was worth watching was Midsommar.
That's very true.
Oh, you haven't seen that yet, have you?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I just, was holding that in.
So, no, I'm with you. And one thing too, and I had a bunch of other stuff in my notes about how, like, one thing that I feel like worked really well with the original was, like, Chucky being pure evil. You know what I mean? Like, he was this killer who's angry and mad and just wants to wreak havoc on the world. And there is none of this, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be bad. Should I feel bad for doing that? I don't know who I am. Like, stuff like the AI had in this one. It was much more, like, dedicated. Also, why did his eyes turn red? Why would you program in the ability to turn the eyes red? Like, at only the time that it was disobeying the safety protocols that were not supposed to not be there. Like, yeah.
Well, I think, why did they have to make it where it was in Vietnam?
Right? Yeah, that was super.
Like, that you could have just done it in America, man.
Yeah, they could have been literally anywhere.
Like, yeah.
No, yeah. But it just, there was something about this movie never felt like it was trying to fully lean into being a horror movie. And that was the thing that just disappointed me. With the original movie, even though, you know, it's kind of a silly premise if you stop and think about it, it at least had that, like, here's this evil force that I don't know how to make sense of that's coming after me, and I'm a kid and I'm trying to defend myself and get away from that and all that. And, you know, it just, for me, the first one worked a lot better as a horror movie.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Also, last line of my notes was Buddy Bears equals Jumping the Shark 2019. I think adding the I at the end of Buddy.
Oh, Buddy, yeah.
Was, yeah. Like, as soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, God, okay.
Yeah. Also, I did some reading about this, and apparently the Buddy Bears were like the director's favorite part. So that tells you, in my opinion, everything you need to know about everything about this movie.
I think, so my ending statement is everything that you need to know about this movie is that the disgruntled employee is at Vietnam, right? That's where it was at?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if you look at the details in IMDb, it was released in 2 languages, English and Vietnamese. So I really want to know what country they slandered in the Vietnamese version. Yeah. And it was probably China, but everyone's too afraid to do it. So it's just like, hey. Yeah.
Also, public service announcement. If you feel like you are in a position where your life is threatened, I would humbly implore you to at least consider rolling about 2 feet to the right or left.
Right.
If there's one thing that we can all take away from this movie, is that things are never as straight forward and backwards as you think they might be.
Very linear way of thinking. We're trying to get you out of it. Is that what linear means?
Yeah. Be safe out there. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.